As Air Canada continues to ramp back up to its usual level of service, many Canadians remain either stranded across the globe or face flight cancellations. If you are in one of those camps, there are a number of things you can do. Joining us is Gabar Lucas, who is the president of airpassengerrights.ca. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon. It's great to be with you.
Let's begin with this. Air Canada has actually created a form on its website that is assisting passengers who have been impacted by this strike. It's not for everyone, but at least it exists, and this is a good sign, you say.
I would say the Air Canada reimbursement form for reimbursing for expenses you incurred for alternate transportation when Air Canada failed to rebook you is a step in the right direction. It is the first time that instead of misleading passengers about their rights, Air Canada is actually acknowledging that it has an obligation to pay for your expenses that you had to incur because they failed to rebook you as required by law. Some of the page's shortcomings, though, are that calling it a refund is a misnomer. This is reimbursement. More importantly, it is restricted currently to passengers who purchase tickets directly from Air Canada. That's inappropriate. Air Canada has to reimburse passengers for their alternate transportation regardless of how they purchased their tickets. If it was an Air Canada flight that caused the passenger to have to purchase alternate transportation, whether it was purchased via airplane or through a travel agent makes no difference. What is important is that you incurred expenses, and Air Canada, being the operating carrier under Section 2, Subsection 1 of the APPR, was required to rebook you. They failed to do so, they have to pay for it. A secondary issue is that Air Canada still has yet to acknowledge its legal obligations to passengers under the Montreal Convention that applies for international travel and requires Air Canada to pay for meals, accommodation, lost wages, and even missed prepaid events. And the cap there is around $12,500 per passenger under that law. And under the European regulations, which also has a counterpart in the UK, that requires Air Canada to pay passenger a lump sum compensation of 600 euros or 520 British pounds per passenger for cancellations under the strike conditions.
So, Gabor, as we go through all of that, if I'm someone abroad and I'm thinking, my first step is, listen, I want to get home, number one. Number two is try to recoup those costs. And as you mentioned, you may not get money back for some of those expenses. Are there any alternate routes that passengers can take to try to get that money back?
Air Canada will have to pay for those expenses. It's just that Air Canada is not owning up yet publicly to having to pay for those expenses.
Okay.
But the law is clear. If you're traveling internationally, then if there's any problem, always pay up front for the expenses and then send the bill to Air Canada. If they refuse to pay, you take Air Canada to small claims court and make them pay for it.
What could a process look like if you have to move to small claims court? I mean, that's the last thing people want to think about, is having to take this to the next step. But what could a waiting period look like in that case?
It depends on your province. In Nova Scotia, you would have your pre-trial or settlement conference in a month and a half or 2 months, typically. Maybe 2.5 months. It's very fast. In British Columbia, you have the BC Civil Resolutions Tribunal, which is doing a great job at enforcing passengers' rights and just recently issued a ruling right about the issue of the Montreal Convention and the requirement to reimburse people for missed events that were prepaid.
Sorry, go ahead.
So in other jurisdictions, in Quebec, it may be a bit lengthier. In Ontario, it may be slightly lengthier. In Nova Scotia, but one thing is sure, do not go to the federal regulator. The Canadian Transportation Agency is going to take you 2 years or more. They have an 87,000 complaint backlog, and they're cozy with their airlines. So they are not going to enforce your rights.
This strike, although short, unprecedented, and potentially setting the path for what we could see in the future when it comes to air passenger rights. What do you think was done right, and what do you think can be improved upon on both sides?
The government's silence was deafening when Air Canada engaged in systemic misleading of passengers that was arguably also fraudulent. Air Canada has been misleading passengers to believe that they have to take a refund. Air Canada was misleading passengers to believe that there were no flights available for them when many passengers were able to go out and buy themselves a ticket on a competitor that Air Canada was required under law to buy for them. The government has taken no action against Air Canada, has not even spoken out publicly about this. This is clearly a failure by the government to manage the crisis. But there is more to it. The strike has also brought to the forefront the many shortcomings of the air passenger protection regulations. Because in Europe, if you have a strike of the airline's own employees, the airline still has to provide you meals and accommodation, and also a lump sum compensation on top of everything just for your inconvenience of 600 euros per passenger or 520 British pounds per passenger. None of this is happening in Canada, where the government has been treating strikes of the airline's own employees much the same way as an act of God, like a snowstorm. This is an absurdity we have in Canada, and it needs to be fixed. We have been urging the government about this issue for many years, and just in our latest submissions from March this year, earlier this year, we have been flagging this very issue about strikes, that it is a Canada-only loophole that is going to harm passengers, and here we are. The government didn't listen, and passengers have been harmed.
Gabor Lucas, appreciate it. There's so much more information on your website, airpassengerrights.ca. We appreciate you taking the time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.